Please welcome actor, writer, director, and activist Asia Kate Dillon.
Hello, hi, can you hear me? As Lucy said, my name is Asia Kate Dillon. My pronouns are they, theirs, and them. I'd like to begin with a minute of mindfulness. So I'd like to invite you to please close your eyes and take this minute to reconnect with your breath. Take this minute to reconnect with yourself, in this room, in this moment now. Breathing in and breathing out at your own pace. On your next inhale, gently remind yourself that you are enough. And on your next exhale, breathe that enoughness out into the room as a gift. On your next inhale, gently remind yourself that you are loved. And on your next exhale, breathe that love out into the room as a gift. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. James Baldwin said, "There is never a time in the future in which we will work out our salvation. The challenge is in the moment, the time is always now." I want to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the unceded territory of the Lenape people. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Lenape community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement recognizes the indigenous peoples who have been dispossessed from their homelands and territories and demonstrates our commitment to the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. As I reflect on the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, I am drawn into remembrance of those that came before, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, all the trans women, femmes, and people of color who started the queer revolution simply by being visible long before I was born. A question that Alicia Garza, co-founder of Black Lives Matter, posed in a conversation I was honored to be a part of was, where do you stand on the power scale? I understood that she didn't just mean the job title or position I held within my place of work. She meant that even as a queer trans person, I still have light skin, which means I benefit from the invention of whiteness and white supremacy. Acknowledgement of this fact does not negate my innate talents, my hard work, my worth, or my own marginalization as a queer person. On my birth certificate, next to the S for sex, there is an F for female. I was assigned female at birth. The F on my birth certificate assigned to me based on a quick glance at my external genitalia marked me. The F marked me as a she, her, miss, ms. In a society socialized, all of us socialized to use a person's body, specifically what is between a baby's legs at birth, to determine their sex and their gender identity. Although I was assigned female at birth, I do not identify with the gender identity placed on top of people who are assigned female at birth. Although I have typically female biological sex characteristics, I am non-binary. According to the Indian Express in the US, ethnographic research reveals that prior to the European dominance, there were absolutely no monolithic gender systems in place. The construction of two specific gender identities as non-interchangeable absolutes was, in fact, the invention of Euro-Western society. Eschewing the binary systems of male and female and man and woman is an essential step toward the breaking down of binary ideological systems created in order to justify and uphold political and economic oppression. We are all assigned a sex, and therefore a gender identity, and therefore a place in an invented hierarchy. Victims of anti-transgender violence in the US are overwhelmingly transgender women of color who live at the dangerous and too often deadly intersections of transphobia, racism, sexism, and criminalization, which often leads to high rates of poverty, unemployment, and homelessness. Transgender people in the US, especially transgender women of color, are impacted by fatal violence at a disproportionate rate. It's important to note that transgender people also face high rates of physical violence, intimate partner violence, and sexual violence, as well as daily microaggressions. Let me echo my colleague, Laverne Cox, who brought the knowledge in her August 2018 interview with Variety when she let us know that 84% of Americans say they do not personally know someone who is transgender, which means that for 84% of Americans, their only interaction with a trans person is through the media. When you cast cis actors in trans roles, not only are you telling trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people who want to be performers that there is no place for them in the performing world, you are also sending a wider message that trans women aren't really women, trans men aren't really men, and non-binary people don't exist. When it comes to casting, it's about broadening and exhausting your search. And we have to broaden our conversations and our understanding around the reasons why, social, political, economic, it has been historically more difficult for trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people, especially those of color, to get access to jobs, let alone auditions, in the entertainment industry. Trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people face higher rates of bullying, depression, anxiety, and suicide, as well as higher rates of workplace and housing discrimination. Why? Because of the long-standing, continued, and purposeful targeting of trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people in this country. If you are a non-trans person who benefits from the invention of whiteness and white supremacy, and you've got a script attempting to tell a story of a trans woman of color and her journey towards becoming a doctor, you must exhaust your search to find a trans woman of color talented enough to play that role. Most likely, you'll find one. And if you've exhausted your search and you can't find a trans woman of color talented enough to play the role, then you better find one, at least one, to help consult on the project, write the project, produce the project, direct the project. And that woman, those women, need to give you permission to cast a non-trans actor, if that person is the best actor for the role, because those women see that you have exhausted your search. Otherwise, by not including the voices of those whose stories you are attempting to tell, you are just an outsider guessing at a life experience. And then what you're actually doing is playing with people's lives by rendering their real lives and experiences invisible. Art has a greater responsibility. Art has the responsibility to teach us how to connect with one another through our shared humanity. When art continues to ignore an entire population of people by effectively rendering them invisible, it's not doing its job. Black trans lives matter. Validating this message means challenging all the people who benefit from the invention of whiteness and white supremacy, self-identified non-trans men in particular, both straight and gay among you. Be the first person in a room to say what pronouns you use and ask others what they use. Put your pronouns in your email signature. If you accidentally misgender someone, just correct yourself. Don't spend time feeling bad about yourself or apologizing, which actually makes the moment about you instead of the person who you've misgendered. Even if you think you know how someone identifies or how someone identified last week, remember that you actually have no idea until you ask them. When you acknowledge that you are ever evolving, ever changing, different every moment of every day, you acknowledge the same is true for all people. The legacy of Stonewall and the next iteration of queer rights demand that we center, uplift, and support the most marginalized, the most disenfranchised among us, those that experience the most backlash from progress, in order to effectively create systemic change. It is these people who can see the forest for the trees and who have blueprints for the solutions that will build our intersectional future. Thank you very much.